It's hard because we have a really good marriage, and every anniversary it's fun to like kind of go back and look at stuff. But for the past 5 years, I can't even like open a file to look at it because it will make me emotional. It's really important to know who you're marrying and not be naive and just kind of jump in and be like, well, God is gonna handle all this. And I think it was a little bit naive on our end. Hey, we are Philip and Leah. I don't know why I pointed to myself as Philip.
I'm Leah.
And we want to use our channel in order to help people and give perspective and talk about things we've learned.
It can kind of be scary if you're planning a wedding right now for all the logistical reasons, but there's also other reasons that we learned the hard way while we were going through the wedding. Some things were good, like affirmations, and others were like, oh man, if we could redo that, we totally would. This is a little bit of advice about a wedding that's on a budget.
Yeah.
You know, of course, like so many things can be solved by having a ton of money. But if you were like we were and you really have to make choices about where you're going to put your money, this might be a helpful video for you. Number 5 is a kind of tough one to hear, but I think it's totally worth it. So stick around for number 5 and let us know what you think. So these are 5 things that we learned from our wedding day.
I would say starting point number 1, be specific, know what you want, and don't compromise. So I am a chronic people pleaser. I have a really hard time setting boundaries or saying no to things. And I think in retrospect, after being in therapy the last several years, I've learned so much about myself and about how hard it is to disappoint people. And if I could go back, there are so many things I would do differently about our wedding that I was just afraid to hurt people's feelings. And even down to, you know, wedding party and inviting people in that I was like, oh my gosh, this person's gonna be upset if I say no to this. But I feel like if you choose the right people, they're going to want to support you in what you're wanting for your wedding.
You want to have as many people as you can to celebrate this special day with you. Your bridal party are people who you want to expect to have in your life 10 years from now. But the people who are like actually actively working with you in the wedding are the ones that, you know, are going to be able to serve and help you on that day. I guess that kind of brings us to our next point. You want to say the second one?
I would have had a wedding coordinator, like 1,000,000%. It would have been so helpful because a lot of the coordination fell on me before we got married. Philip was working all the way up until the wedding, and I was as well, but I kind of just ended up taking on the stereotypical role of like being the bride who planned everything, and I had no idea how to run or organize a wedding. One of the biggest things I think we bumped into was, unfortunately, like because we needed help and we didn't have money to pay people, it ended up leading to a lot of internal kind of relational messiness. My little sister was my maid of honor, but she was barely 17 at the time. So it was really hard for her to put her foot down for me because she was a baby, like she was a child. My poor mom was running around last minute, day of, and was like trying to help with things that she thought I wanted. And I didn't really care about some of the decorations that were being done. I was like, no, I just want you to be upstairs sitting with me. And that is something, if I could go back and redo, I 100,000,000% would just hire somebody who's an outside source so that you don't end up hurting like friends or family because we didn't have any money and we just needed help.
Point number 3, don't skimp on media.
We were DIY for a wedding. Our entire wedding was under $6,000, so we were like very good on budget in order to invest more into like a honeymoon in our future, in our marriage.
So even in our very low budget wedding, about 30% of our money went to the photo and the video. It's the thing that you're going to look back on and remember your wedding with. Like your wedding day is so fast that everyone says you sort of forget about it. So you really bank on like the photos and the video that are taken on the wedding day.
Yeah, this one is the hardest thing for me. I think it's probably number 1 of the list. It's very emotional for us because we have a really good marriage, and every anniversary it's fun to like kind of go back and look at stuff, and a lot of our videography was somehow damaged in the process. And so it's really painful to watch because my mom is giving a speech and it's like glitching the whole time. And so my heart aches when I watch it. And we also made the mistake of asking to be phones free so that people were really like in the moment and not filming the whole time. And because of that, we just don't have a lot of footage from the wedding. For the past 5 years, I can't even like open a file to look at it because it will make me emotional. And like the shot of our vows is probably the only shot I really wanted. And we don't have just a shot of us sharing our vows together. It's kind of iconic for weddings that you see the groom's face as the bride walks down the aisle. And I thought I made the mistake of assuming that was intuitive, like that would be an obvious thing to photograph, but we have one photo that I had to like really ask for of his face when I was coming down the aisle, and it's really blurry, and it's probably my favorite photo from the wedding because it was his reaction to seeing me. But yeah, that's just like things we learned that if I could tell someone, which we've now done wedding photography, and I'm like very specific because I don't want people to feel how we unfortunately felt of being like, no, this part wasn't captured. So yeah, like don't skimp on media. And if you have the money, invest it into a videographer and photographer that you really love.
That's where you want to put your money. You're going to have those photos and those videos for, you know, your whole life to be able to look back on. Point 4, delay your honeymoon. That's something that we ended up sort of happenstantially doing.
This was one we kind of, I think we did right, almost.
Yeah.
It was like, we had it a couple days after, but that's not really enough time.
Yeah.
It was definitely not enough
there's
time.
kind of like, so we actually had a couple of days back at our place before we left for our honeymoon. And then secondarily, our honeymoon was actually just kind of a road trip that even if we redid it, would be even simpler than it was. Like, we ended up really kind of changing things up and just landing in San Diego and kind of staying there because we realized that's all we really wanted to do was be in one place that's beautiful, but also we can just spend time together. And you don't necessarily need to be in Hawaii or something like that because, well, to be honest with you, sometimes you just want to stay indoors and spend time with each other. What we ended up doing was having a really great 1-year anniversary trip to Hawaii. And that was the one that, you know, you can spend months planning and scheduling and saving up for if you need to.
Yeah.
And just doing that on top of wedding planning would be so much. And so if you can, delay your honeymoon, the big one, for like a year, and that way you can put a lot more energy and love into it, and when you're on vacation you can really be on vacation and enjoy the time and the place where you're at. Yeah,
for sure. That one, I think, again, I've heard advice on that being kind of mixed, where people, you want to chase that feeling as soon as you get married to like go off and like be whisked into the wind and celebrate, which is beautiful, but there's also so much to unpack after a wedding. There's so much that needs to be done logistically, especially if you're a DIY wedding. Again, I just don't think we could have underestimated the amount of things that we needed to do afterward. And we were kind of being like, our phones were blowing up a little bit with even interpersonal things after the wedding that was just way too much, that we just needed to be able to like take an exhale. My eye was twitching for about 3 weeks. No exaggeration. It was like twitching 2 weeks before the wedding and then a week after because of the amount of stress that we were under. And yeah, I really just wish that we had given ourselves more time afterward to get to go and then truly celebrate and relax.
Number 5. I know this is the hard one.
Talk about your trauma. We did have premarital counselors, but there's so much that you can't possibly know about yourself that can come out in marriage. And I think I personally wish I had been a little bit more prepared for that. I don't believe that you have to be perfect or healed or whatever before you get married. We've grown so much together and it's been beautiful and amazing. But I think really doing your work before you get married is, I just can't stress that enough. And because we are believers, there are some really strong boundaries in Christian circles where it's like, you shouldn't be emotionally intimate in these ways, protect each other's hearts, and all these things that you hear a lot if you are a Christian that I actually think can be pretty harmful. And I know that people will be upset, but that's been my experience. And there were certain things we knew about each other, and then a lot of things we didn't know. Trying to become a healthy person before you get married is only going to be a good thing, in my opinion.
On one hand, you're never going to really get everything out. That's why you get married, is because you've got a lifetime ahead of you of learning this other person.
Right, yeah.
But there's also some stuff that you want to talk about before you get married that you don't want to be worried about on the wedding day. For us, we actually had 2 different couples that were our premarital counselors, and one had been married for like 40 something years, been there, done that,
yes.
and just this loving, caring couple that had us over for dinner regularly.
And then we had a couple who was like, they'd been married for 5 years, and we also just loved them. They were clearly very in love with each other, and that was surprisingly hard to find in LA. We didn't have a lot of, I think, healthy marriages exampled to us, and so they kind of stood out because they just loved each other.
Okay, and point number 6. What? There's a point number 6? I thought this was just 5.
Oh my goodness.
Nope, there's definitely one more. We had to add it because it was something that is not exactly related to the wedding day, but it might be something that you plan for after the wedding. And that is simply to give yourselves like a year of time where you get to be in your own, how would I put it? Where you get to be cocooned. And take the time together to prioritize yourselves, because, man, we felt it right after the wedding, and then continued on after that people are going to still demand your time. People are going to want to engage in your life. But,
yeah.
You know, marriage is really a reset for the way that you do life. And so give yourselves that 1 year time to be able to focus on your relationship and each other. We were a COVID couple, so 6 months after we got married, we hit this pandemic, and it ended up being kind of a silver lining because nobody was demanding our time.
Nobody wanted to see us.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to see anybody, so it was kind of great in that way that we got to hermit. And yeah, that's a really good point. We were allowed to just prioritize each other and figure out what it meant to be married. And if you have some type of belief system that makes you not live together and experience marriage together beforehand, it's a way bigger transition, which makes the cocoon effect really helpful because you get to just focus on what it means to be married.
We hope that these 5 or 6 things was helpful to you. This is like our first video that we've done, really. And so if you found this to be valuable, then please subscribe to our channel, and we're gonna make a lot more stuff like this. Leave a comment below if you have any questions about your wedding experience or our wedding experience. Then we love engaging with you and engaging. Is that a pun? Engaged?
I get what you're saying.
Okay. Anyway.
It's marriage.
So. All right. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.